Hey guys, it's Tina at Scrappin Rabbit, and I have a project share for you today. It is my day to post on the Jaded Blossom blog, and I made a really fun project to share. These are the Jaded Blossom dies and stamps that I used. So I used the envelope dies, the card mat dies, these butterflies, which I absolutely adore. This is one of my favorite sets. This Simple Sayings, which has some wonderful sentiments in this set. The Fairy Sweet scent, I did use a sentiment from there, the Origami Fun, and the Tree Tag die. So I used all kinds of wonderful JB goodies for my project. And so let me share with you what I made. So I created this mini note card gift set, and I had seen on Pinterest a little crate, and I wanted to create something like that using I created an SVG in Cricut Design Space. And so this little box here, it was pretty easy to do, and it measures about a little more than 3 3/4, and well, I guess 3 3/4 by 2. And so it's a nice good size to fit little mini note cards. And I used some wood grained patterned paper, and I sized it to fit this cellophane bag that I had. And then I put some note cards in there, and then I decorated with this really pretty tag. So this is my project, and so I'm going to show you the process of how I made this, and I'll walk you through all the different steps. So let's get started. So here is the die cut that I cut out with my Cricut, and it's the SVG that I created, and I'm using a double-sided cardstock with the wood grain on one side. You can see inside the crate, and so I didn't want it to be stark white, so I used the double-sided paper. I'm using the bone folder to fold over all of the score lines, and then I'm going to ink up with some Distress ink to give it that finishing touch, all before I go ahead and glue it together. I like the size of this little crate, and I really think it looks realistic. I looked at some pictures of some actual crates to try to figure out how I wanted to design this in Design Space. And it was pretty simple to do, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I'm just inking it up, and then I'll have to get ready to start the glue. And this is the paper that I used. I'm using some Scotch tacky glue. I do like to use liquid glue for a lot of my 3D type of projects. I find that they really hold and they endure. And so I'm just going to fold over on the edges that need to be glued down, and it takes just a few seconds for the glue to really set, so when you are gluing it you do need to hold on to it until it starts to dry, and then it adheres, and it adheres very nicely. And so I'm just going over the small edges, and I'm going to tuck that bottom flap under so that you're not seeing those little side flaps when you're peering down into the inside of the box. And so again, I think that this little crate turned out so cute, and I'm looking forward to using it to put more little goodies in. And I was inspired by a picture that I saw on Pinterest, and so I have fun when I get something in my mind and I want to recreate it. And so it turned out really good. I'm going to use the card mat dies for the top layer on my little mini note cards, and so I'm just running it through my Big Shot. And the paper that I'm using is a Hammermill. It's an 80-pound white cover, and I find that it works really great for stamping and Copic coloring, and so it is my go-to at this point because I have a huge stack of it. And so every now and then I'll switch it up and use different paper, but this paper works out really nice, and it's a decent weight, and especially for card layering. And so those are my front stitched panels. And now I'm using some Recollections 110-pound cardstock for the card bases, and I'm just using my Fiskars paper cutter, and I'm measuring out 3 inches and then 6 inches, and then so that's the mini note card size is going to be a 3-inch square. And so I'm cutting down 4 of them, and now I will need to get my scoreboard so that I can score it in half and get a nice fold. And I'm frustrated with this bone folder. I seem to have misplaced my bone folder. It was driving me crazy, and so I'm using ones that I don't normally use, and so this one is very flimsy, and then this my Cricut one has the metal on it and it scratches the paper. So, but I finally got my note cards nice and folded and ready to go. So now I'm using this white cardstock. It is from Joann's, and it's really thin and kind of flimsy, so I don't really use it for much at all. I don't use it for die cutting, but I think that it works perfectly for envelopes because it is on the thinner side. And so I'm using this Jaded Blossom envelope dies, and that larger die makes the perfect envelope for a little mini note card. And this envelope die has stitching across the folding flap, so it's a really cute die. I really do prefer my dies to have stitching because otherwise I figure my Cricut can do it. And so I'm going ahead and I'm just running this die through my Big Shot 4 times so that I can get my 4 little envelopes all ready to go for my little mini note cards. I'm going to feature the butterfly stamp on my project. I really adore this stamp set. I think the butterflies are so pretty and they stamp beautifully. I'm going for the medium size butterfly and I'm putting it on my stamp block. I'm going to be using my VersaFine black ink, and I do like to stamp directly on a stamp pad. I find that the stamp quality is definitely improved, and with this VersaFine ink you really can't go wrong. It really does a great job. I'm loving how clean the edges are, and for the most part I don't have any issues stamping with VersaFine ink. And then you have a little bit of a time to play with putting the embossing powder on, because it works great for embossing, and I just put some clear embossing powder on there on each one. And sometimes I have to go over it a second time if it doesn't stick the first time. And then I find that the images really emboss beautifully with this VersaFine ink and the clear embossing powder. So now I'm going to get ready to use my heat tool to get it all embossed. I turn on my heat tool and I let it go for a few seconds before I heat emboss on my paper. I find that that helps a lot, and then you don't overheat your paper, and as you can see it embosses beautifully. So I'm choosing my colors, and I decide to go with the B04, B02, and the B01. I'm going to go with 3 different shades of blue, and I'm just going to color, and I'm not exactly sure what look I'm going for, but I'm going from dark to light with the darkest on the inside of the wing and then going towards the outside of the wing with the lighter, and then I just go dark to medium to light to blend it through and make sure and see if I like the way that it looks. Sorry that my head is getting in there. I think I should have zoomed in just a little bit more. I am learning. It's really hard to color. I'm usually right on top of my images when I color, and I'm trying so hard to remember to put what color, the lid out to show what colors that I'm using. And here I'm using the V06, V12, BV00, and the V01. And again, I'm going to go from the darkest to the medium and then to the very light. So I'm using 4 different colors for the purple. And I'm liking how this one's turning out. I think that they all look really pretty. I mean, it's hard to go wrong if you just have a few Copic colors that can blend pretty nicely. You can get some really nice looks. And I'm loving coloring with my Copics, and I try to pick up a few markers every month. They are pricey, but I'm trying to build up my collection so I can get better at coloring. So now for the next butterfly, I'm going to use these oranges and these yellows. And so I'm going with 4 shades, and again, just like the previous 2 sets, I'm going from the darkest to the medium and then blending it out a little bit and then adding that 3rd color and then having the lightest color around the tips of the wings. And I just go back and forth from the dark to the light, adding a little bit more color. I'm going to probably go back in with the dark again. Yeah. Just to give it a little bit more contrast there. And then for the last set, I'm going to go with some teals, and they're the BG09, BG11, BG53, and I can't remember what that lightest one was. Hopefully the camera was in focus so that you can see it. And so these teals are a different look from the blues that I used. And I really do like this blend as it's coming through. You always wonder if you have enough colors to get a good blend, and it's so hard because sometimes you're not sure which numbers to go with when you're purchasing. And so I just go back again with the dark and then blend it out to get a nice little transitioning color on the wings. So here are my finished butterflies. I've finished coloring, and I ran them through my scan and cut machine, and it cut it out. It cut them out beautifully. I also cut out 4 black panels that are just slightly larger than the die cut, the stitched squares that I did, so that I could have it pop just a little bit on the card. Having that little black frame, I think, makes a huge difference. And so as I'm putting the note cards together, I'm coming up with more ideas of what I need to do. So I'm going to use this Simple Saying stamp set for the sentiments. There's some great sentiments on this set, and they're just the perfect size. And so I'm going to use my VersaFine ink again, and I'm choosing a sentiment. I'm going to put it on my stamp block and go ahead and ink it up and put it on my little stitched square. Sorry that I'm outside of the frame. I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some embossing powder on it right away. Since I'm going to be doing 4, I don't want to risk the ink drying. It does not dry as fast as dye ink, but it will dry, and it'll be harder to get the embossing powder on it. So I do like to do the embossing powder straight away if I can. So the next sentiment is Happy Birthday, and so now I'm going to go in to choose another sentiment and adhere it on my block, and the same thing, stamping it on the lower right hand corner of my stitched square and sprinkling some embossing powder on there. I went with 4 different sentiments so that way whoever receives this has choices as to what they can use these little note cards for. And I figured with butterflies you can get several different kinds of sentiments that will fit just fine. And so I'm going to do my last sentiment now. I'm going to ink it up and get it stamped, and then sprinkle the embossing powder on it. So now I'm running my heat tool and getting it warmed up, and then I'm going to heat emboss all 4 of the sentiments onto my stitched panel. And you need the tweezers to give you a little distance because it will get very hot. So I have this Cuttlebug folder, and I'm thinking that I want to give that panel a little texture, and so I am embossing it, and I am using my Cuttlebug for the embossing because it's easier for me. I have that set up for embossing, and then I have my Big Shot set up for die cutting, and that way I don't have to worry about my sandwiches. It's all ready to go. Now that I have my front panels done, I'm using my ATG gun to adhere those white squares on to the black frames that I cut out. And so I'm just trying to center them the best that I can. And the ATG works great for adhering paper to paper, and especially when it's layers in a card, it holds it really nicely. So now that I have all 4 of those done, I'm going to adhere them to the card base. And so again, I'm using my ATG gun, and I'm just going to tape up the 4 sides and get them all nice and even as much as possible and adhere to the card base. So now I'm coming up with the final design and placement of my butterflies, and so I've decided to go with a double-sided sticky tape for the first butterfly, and then that one will get placed down directly on top of the card. And then I'm going to pop up the second butterfly using double-sided foam tape. And then so that's going to give a little bit more dimension so both butterflies aren't laying flat. And so again, each card is going to be slightly different because the sentiments sizes varies, and so the placement will be a little bit different for each one. And I'm liking pairing up the blue with the purple and then the teal with the orange. And I think that that gives it a really nice little look. And so I'm happy with how they turned out with the butterflies in the end. So once I get them finished, I'm thinking, of course, that they need a little sparkle. So I'm getting my Spectrum Noir sparkle marker and I'm going over each one of the butterflies. And you do have to be a little bit careful because this marker will blend the Copics, and so I'm lightly going on top, and then if I find that the marker picks up color, I'm dabbing it on some scrap paper that I have handy. I want to decorate the envelopes, and so I'm going to use the butterfly stamp set again, as well as the little fluttering stamp from the Origami Fun. And I'm going to be using a Memento. It's a plum ink, and I go over the stamp really thoroughly, and I do a triple stamping technique so you can get 3 shades of the same color, and I think that it turned out really nice. So I'm going to do that with the plum 2 times for the 2 envelopes. And then I'm going to go and do 2 more using the Lagoon colored Close to My Heart ink. And I really think that the triple stamping really gives it a fun look and just a little something extra special for the front of the envelopes. Putting the envelopes together is really, really easy. You just need to adhere adhesive to 2 ends, and then it folds up wonderfully. And then I just go over that with my bone folder to reinforce the ATG gun. And then I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive to the top so that the recipient can close up the envelopes. And as you can see, it's a perfect fit. And so I'm just going to do that to the remaining 3 envelopes, and then the envelopes will be finished. I begin to package my finished note cards, and I'm using a tulle ribbon to wrap around and tie a bow. And so once I get the bow that I like, I'll trim it up with my scissors and stick it in the box. I decide to add a pen that has butterflies on it. Using the Spring Dice 2 set, I am going to cut out the butterfly with some glitter stock paper to make a little planner clip. And so I cut the butterflies through my Big Shot as well as a white piece of backing. And then so once I get the 3 cuts through, I'm going to adhere them together. I use some multimedia matte for the layers, and so I put that on there very carefully to get every little space covered so that it's a nice tight adherence. And then I use glue gun just for the center to lay the clip on top, and then I go ahead and I put the glittery piece on top and push it together to get a nice and tight fit. The top layer is going to go on, and I'm going to also use the multimedia matte. And I find that that works best when you're adhering onto glitter cardstock. The glue gun will sometimes pop off. So now, once I feel like it's on there good, I'm going to add some pink pearls and glue those on. And even though there's adhesive, I'm also going to add some multimedia matte just so I make sure that it does stay together. And I decide to add 3 pearls, and it finally gives me the look that I like, and I think that it really turns out cute. And I think that I hope whoever receives this will enjoy this in their planner. I decide to tuck in some paper shred into the little crate, and so I have the butterfly pen in there and my butterfly planner clip. I'm using the cellophane bag that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and tuck the box in there. And I'm still a little undecided about the placement of things, so I fuss with it a little bit. And then I'm going to create a tag to go on the outside of the bag, and I'm using the Treat Tag die. So I'm using the same paper that I used the crate for the outside of the tag. And then I'm going to also cut a layer with this light pink design paper. And next I'm going to cut a little banner for my sentiment, and I decide to use the Your Flutterific sentiment from the Fairy Stamps. And I'm also going to use the Jaded Blossom flower dies to cut out a flower to go on top of the tag as well. I'm cutting out a few leaves to go underneath the flower. And this green paper is a doodle bug design paper. It's a nice light green to coordinate with everything. And so now I have all my die cuts, and I did stamp and emboss onto vellum the large butterfly, and I'm going to color that up with my Copics. I'm going to use the same purple combo that I did for the smaller butterflies, and I'm going to color on to the vellum. So vellum is a little bit trickier to color with. The color just kind of moves around a lot. As soon as you go to do the second shade, it removes the first layer that you did, so you kind of have to go over and over and over with it to get the dark color that you want. But it is a transparent paper, so I think that it really gives it a nice stained glass type of a look. And so I'm just going to fuss with it and color away until I get a look that I like. And so if you ever color on vellum, you'll see it's different because the color sits on top. It does not get absorbed into the vellum like it will with cardstock. Once I'm done coloring, I'm going to want to add some sparkle. So again, with my sparkle marker, I'm just lightly dabbing because it will pick up the color until I'm happy with the sparkle that I get. Next, I'm going to fussy cut this image out. And I haven't tried cutting vellum with my scan and cut yet, so that's something that I will need to experiment before I actually use it on an actual project, because I don't want to risk ripping anything that I've created when I'm not sure about the cut settings. So I'm going to stamp the sentiment for my tag, and same as before, I'm using the VersaFine ink along with the clear embossing powder, and I'm going to use the heat tool to emboss it, and that will be the final layer for my little tag here. I'm using my Zig 2-way glue for the smaller pieces, my ATG for the larger pieces, and I'm just going to put the tag together in a way that I think looks cute. And so I'm just adding all the final layers one by one. I'm going to put the flower together, and I use some textured white cardstock for the flower, and then I'm using a little bit of the multimedia matte, and I want to add the little leaves behind, and so I'm going to trim the little stems since you're not going to see those anyways behind the flower. And now I'm just deciding the final placement for everything, and I'm going to glue it all together in hopes to make a really pretty little tag for my gift bag. I'm going to use some double-sided foam and cut a really thin strip to place behind the butterfly so that it is popping up for a little bit of a 3D look, and I bend the wings back as well. I add the little sentiment across the bottom, and I'll pop that up as well after I do add a little bit of sparkle. And that goes on to the bottom of the tag. And so I just put the double-sided foam on there. And now it's time to place it onto my project. And so I'm tying a ribbon with some pink sheer, I think it's like organza ribbon, I think is what it's called. And then I'm going to use some twine to adhere the tag to the ribbon. And once I get it cut, I'm going to fuss with it and work my bow. It does take me a while. I do fuss a lot with the bows. And then I'll trim it to my satisfaction. And there it is. There is my final project, all complete. So I thank you all so much for watching. I tried to keep this video under 25 minutes, but there was a lot of different parts to it, so I really hope that you enjoyed it. So again, thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and happy crafting, everybody. Bye!